It was a calm afternoon in one of Tokyo's busiest street markets. Sunlight danced through the narrow gaps between old wooden stalls, casting patterns on the cobblestone streets. The smell of grilled yakitori mingled with the scent of fresh fruits and flowers, while the sound of distant chatter and laughter filled the air. Vendors called out cheerfully, trying to attract customers to their colorful stalls, and the occasional street musician played a cheerful tune on a shamisen. Everything seemed ordinary, peaceful, and yet, there was a subtle hum of life that made the scene feel alive. In the middle of this bustling market stood a man. Not particularly tall, not particularly loud, and yet, his presence commanded attention. There was something about the way he stood, shoulders relaxed, eyes calm, hands folded gently in front of him, that made the chaos around him seem distant. People passed by without noticing him, yet when someone accidentally brushed against him, he did not flinch. He moved with the kind of calm that can only come from years of discipline and experience, a presence so silent it made the world feel like it had slowed down for a moment. Shoppers laughed as they sampled street food, children darted between stalls chasing each other, and the wind carried the faint scent of cherry blossoms from a nearby park. Birds chirped from the rooftops, oblivious to the human drama about to unfold. For the moment, everything was perfect. The market was alive, vibrant, and unaware that tension was quietly creeping into its heart. Among the crowd, there was one man whose eyes lingered too long. Tall, broad-shouldered, and with a face twisted in annoyance, he pushed past people roughly. His gaze fell on the calm figure in the center, and a smirk formed on his lips. He was looking for trouble. Something about the stillness of the older man seemed to irritate him, as if he could not tolerate peace without asserting dominance. And that's when it happened. A casual bump, barely noticeable in the chaos of the market, set everything in motion. The calm figure barely reacted, but the tall man's irritation spiked. His voice cut sharply through the pleasant market sounds, echoing unnaturally against the narrow alleyways. Little did anyone know, this ordinary afternoon was about to change forever. Because one man was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. And the market, so full of life just moments ago, was about to become the stage for a lesson no one would forget.
The peaceful hum of the Tokyo market had barely settled into its rhythm when it happened. Among the rows of colorful stalls, a tall, broad-shouldered man barreled through the crowd. His steps were heavy, almost like thunder in the midst of the lively market. He wasn't looking where he was going. All that mattered was that he could assert himself, and in his mind, anyone who looked calm or different was a target. Without warning, he bumped directly into the older man standing quietly near a stall selling fresh fruit. The collision was not forceful enough to hurt, yet the tall man's reaction was immediate and explosive. "Watch where you're going, old man," he snapped, his voice cutting through the laughter of children and the soft strumming of a shamisen nearby. The words were sharp, commanding, and dripping with contempt. His broad shoulders squared as if preparing for a fight, and a twisted smirk crossed his face, daring anyone to challenge him. The older man didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He barely moved, only slightly bowing his head, a gesture of politeness, almost as if he were apologizing for a collision he hadn't caused. His calmness was palpable, like a still pond in the middle of a storm. The crowd slowed down, some stealing glances at the scene, sensing that something was about to unfold. Phones were raised instinctively, capturing the tension in real time. The bully, however, was not here for apologies. His eyes narrowed, scanning the older man as if searching for a crack in his calm exterior. "Ha, not even a word," he sneered, taking a step closer, his shadow stretching across the cobblestone. People started whispering among themselves, some instinctively stepping back, others leaning in with curiosity. Something about the older man's silence made the situation feel different. It wasn't fear. It wasn't weakness. It was something else, an unspoken confidence that unsettled the aggressor. The taller man's voice rose, sharper now, louder. "I said, watch where you're going." His hand gestured aggressively, almost threateningly, and the calm man still did nothing. There was no panic, no rush, no defensive move. Just a steady, quiet composure that made the bully hesitate for a fraction of a second, a fraction that would soon matter more than anyone could imagine. The tension in the market grew. Onlookers stopped their shopping, their attention drawn entirely to this clash of two very different energies. The contrast couldn't have been starker, a man filled with aggression and impatience, and a calm figure, almost motionless, radiating quiet strength. And in that moment, everyone watching realized, this wasn't just a simple bump in a crowded market. This was the beginning of a lesson in patience, power, and control. Have you ever stayed calm when someone disrespected you? Comment below if you think patience is true power. The air in the Tokyo market had shifted. What was once a peaceful afternoon now felt tense, like the moment before a storm breaks. Shoppers slowed their steps, children froze mid-chase, and even the street musicians seemed to hesitate in their notes. All eyes were drawn to the confrontation unfolding in the middle of the bustling crowd. The tall, aggressive man was now fully in motion, his chest rising and falling with irritation. "I told you to watch where you're going," he shouted again, this time louder, sharper, as if repeating himself could somehow force the older man to react. His fingers curled into fists, his knuckles white with tension. He leaned in, trying to intimidate, his face a mix of anger and disbelief. How could someone be so calm? How could someone not flinch under pressure? The older man didn't move. Not a twitch, not a step back, not even a glance aside. His eyes met the bully's, steady and unshaken. There was no fear. There was no panic. Just a silent, unwavering presence that made the bully falter ever so slightly. Around them, the crowd began to notice. Phones came out, capturing every second. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Is that him? He's not moving at all. Why isn't he scared?" People instinctively stepped back, sensing that something far bigger than a minor street scuffle was about to unfold. The bully, frustrated by the lack of reaction, tried a new tactic. "You think you're better than me? You think your silence makes you stronger?" he sneered, his voice echoing through the narrow streets. He took a step closer, invading the older man's personal space, expecting submission, expecting fear. Instead, he was met with nothing but calm eyes, a gentle tilt of the head, and the faintest trace of a confident smile. It was maddening. Every aggressive shout, every threatening gesture, only seemed to make the older man more serene. People around them could feel it, an almost magnetic calm that drew attention and held it. The contrast couldn't have been clearer, a storm of anger meeting a wall of unshakable calm. The tension escalated further. The bully's voice rose, his words sharper, more cutting, designed to provoke a reaction. "I'll teach you a lesson," he barked. Yet, despite his rage, the older man remained completely composed, his breathing slow, controlled, deliberate. Even in silence, he communicated strength, a quiet warning that this was not a man to be underestimated. And then, just as the bully prepared to make his next move, a subtle shift occurred. The surrounding crowd leaned in, phones ready, eyes wide. There was something in the older man's demeanor, a calm before the storm, a patience so precise, that made everyone realize the moment of reckoning was near. Something about the way he stood, the way he held himself, seemed almost unnatural in its control. It was like watching a coiled spring, perfectly poised, and yet hidden in plain sight. The crowd could sense it, even if they didn't yet understand it. And in that charged silence, a new realization spread among the onlookers. The bully had crossed a line he could never uncross. The tension in the Tokyo market had reached a fever pitch. The bustling sounds of laughter, music, and conversation had all but vanished. Even the wind seemed to hesitate, the usual rustling of leaves replaced by a heavy, almost suffocating stillness. Every eye in the crowded street was fixed on the two men at the center of it all. The bully, frustrated beyond measure by the older man's unwavering calm, decided it was time to escalate. His patience had worn thin. He raised his hand, broad and imposing, the fingers stiff with anger. "I've had enough of this," he shouted, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Without another word, he swung his hand toward the man's face. The slap was sharp, deliberate, and echoed unnaturally against the narrow alleyways lined with wooden stalls. Time seemed to stretch. The sound of the impact was louder than it should have been, almost surreal, and the effect on the crowd was instantaneous. A collective gasp swept through the market. Shoppers froze mid-step. Children stopped chasing each other, their eyes wide with shock. Vendors clutched their stalls, unsure whether to intervene. The birds, once chirping happily from the rooftops, fell silent as if even nature itself had paused to witness the moment. The older man staggered slightly, the movement almost imperceptible, but his expression remained calm. His eyes, unshaken and piercing, met the bully's gaze directly. There was no flinch, no anger, no rush for retaliation, just a quiet, unwavering awareness that made the air between them feel electric. For a moment, the market held its collective breath. The slap had broken the peace, but it had not broken him. The bully, expecting fear, expecting a reaction of panic or anger, was met instead with a silence so heavy it pressed against his chest. He could feel it. The calm was not weakness. It was something far stronger, something he had never encountered before. The crowd whispered among themselves, stunned. "Who is he?" one person murmured. "How can someone stay so calm?" another asked. Phones shook slightly in hands as bystanders recorded the moment, capturing every detail of the bully's astonishment and the older man's unshakable poise. And then, in that charged silence, the older man spoke, softly, almost casually, his voice calm yet carrying a weight that commanded attention. "You've made your choice," he said, his words deliberate. "Now, there will be consequences." The bully's smirk faltered. The laughter that had carried him moments ago died in his throat. The realization began to dawn that he had misjudged this man entirely. He had assumed silence was weakness. He had assumed calm was submission. But the quiet, controlled presence standing before him was something else entirely, a force that needed no aggression to dominate. The market remained frozen, every eye locked on the two figures, the tension palpable. Shoppers leaned closer, curious yet wary. Even the sun seemed to dip slightly behind a building, casting a shadow over the scene, as if the universe itself acknowledged that a turning point had arrived. In that single suspended moment, the bully understood, too late, that he had crossed a line he could never uncross. The market remained frozen in the wake of the slap. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes every small sound echo. Even the distant chatter of vendors and the rustling of leaves seemed muffled, as if the city itself was holding its breath. The crowd's eyes darted between the two men at the center, uncertain of what would happen next. The bully's chest heaved, his face a mix of anger, disbelief, and confusion. He had expected chaos, a flinch, a shout, anything, but what he saw was calm. Unshakable calm. The kind of calm that does not need words, does not need threats, and certainly does not react to aggression with aggression. Steven Seagal, standing motionless, surveyed the scene. His eyes, sharp and unwavering, locked onto the bully. There was a subtle tilt of his head, a quiet acknowledgement that the situation could have been avoided, but now there was no turning back. Every movement, every breath, was deliberate. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The sheer presence of calm power was already communicating more than words ever could. The bully, still trembling with frustration, attempted another intimidation tactic. "You think you're untouchable? That silence makes you stronger," he barked, stepping closer, fist raised slightly. But Steven didn't move. His body language was relaxed, yet it radiated controlled strength. There was a strange energy in the air, a tension so electric it made even the bravest onlookers instinctively step back. People in the crowd began whispering, their curiosity growing. Phones lifted higher, recording, capturing the drama. "Who is this man?" one murmured. "He's not like anyone I've ever seen," said another. The older man's calmness seemed almost unnatural, magnetic, like the eye of a storm where all chaos fades into stillness. Steven finally spoke, his voice low, deliberate, carrying the weight of experience. "I tried to warn you," he said, not with anger, but with a quiet firmness. "Not for me, for you." The words were simple, yet they carried a strange authority. The bully laughed nervously, dismissing them at first. He had no idea what they truly meant. But the crowd could sense it, the calm warning, the unspoken threat hidden behind absolute composure. Something was coming, and it was not immediate, yet it was inevitable. The whispers among the crowd grew, "He's not alone, something's about to happen." People instinctively leaned back, unsure whether to run or stay, eyes wide. There was a strange tension, a growing anticipation that something far bigger than a simple street confrontation was about to unfold. Every second dragged, yet every second increased the suspense. The older man remained composed, silent, his focus unbroken. He didn't panic. He didn't hurry. Instead, he seemed to be waiting, patiently, deliberately, for the perfect moment. The bully, on the other hand, was rattled. His confidence, which had seemed unshakable moments ago, was now cracking under the weight of the unspoken threat. And then, in the silence of that suspended moment, the crowd realized something extraordinary. There was a reason why the older man had not reacted. There was a reason why his calmness was so disarming. There was something about him, something that no one could ignore, and that the bully would soon regret. The tension was unbearable. Every heartbeat in the market seemed louder. Every whisper, every step, every rustle of clothing was magnified. And everyone knew, whatever was about to happen, it was going to change everything. Have you ever felt someone's calm presence completely change a situation? Comment, calm power, if you think patience is stronger than aggression. The market had grown eerily silent. Even the hum of conversation and the calls of vendors seemed to fade into the background, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Every eye was fixed on the calm figure standing amidst the crowd. The tension had reached its breaking point, and everyone waiting knew the storm was about to strike, but no one could have predicted exactly how. The bully, chest heaving and fists trembling, still hadn't realized the full weight of his mistake. He had assumed the calm man before him was weak, vulnerable, perhaps even foolish. But now, as the older man slowly shifted his weight, the realization began to dawn. This was no ordinary confrontation. Suddenly, in one fluid motion, the older man moved. Not hurriedly, not aggressively, but with the precision of someone who had anticipated every possible action. His body shifted like a coiled spring being released, each step measured and deliberate. The crowd instinctively stepped back, phones held high, capturing every movement in awe. The bully tried to react, but it was already too late. In less than a heartbeat, he found himself disarmed, not physically, but mentally, his aggression crumbling before the unshakable composure of the man before him. The sheer presence of quiet power had stripped him of his confidence. The older man spoke softly, his voice carrying calm authority. "I tried to warn you. This was your choice." The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of undeniable truth. Every onlooker felt it. The bully's bravado evaporated instantly, replaced by a sudden, chilling clarity. He had misjudged this man entirely. What he had assumed was silence, weakness, and submission was in fact discipline, control, and mastery. The crowd began murmuring, recognizing the man now. Whispers spread like wildfire. "That's Steven Seagal. No, it can't be. He's real." The bully froze, his face draining of color. The realization hit him with full force. He hadn't just disrespected a stranger, he had challenged a legend. The older man's calmness had been a warning, his silence a shield, and the crowd now understood the magnitude of what had just unfolded. Steven Seagal, still composed, simply adjusted his jacket, his gaze scanning the surrounding crowd. There was no celebration, no anger, only quiet control. People stepped closer, whispering and recording, still in awe of what they had witnessed. Every camera phone captured the moment, a visual testament to the sheer power of calm over aggression. The bully, utterly defeated, sank to his knees, the weight of his mistake crushing him. He had sought to dominate, to humiliate, to provoke fear, but in the end, he had only exposed his own arrogance. Every movement, every breath, every attempt at aggression had been met with a force far greater than he had imagined. Not brute strength, but something far more powerful, mastery over oneself. As the crowd began to absorb the moment, some stepped forward to congratulate the older man, while others simply stared in stunned silence. Children who had been playing moments ago were now wide-eyed, witnessing a lesson in control and respect that would stay with them forever. Steven finally turned and walked slowly away, leaving a stunned, silent crowd in his wake. There was no boast, no celebration, only the quiet affirmation of what true strength looks like. A calm presence, patience, and mastery over oneself can command respect in ways that rage and aggression never can. The bully remained on the ground, humiliated not by force, but by realization. He had learned the hardest lesson in the most public way possible. Never underestimate calm, measured power. The market slowly began to breathe again. The laughter of children returned, faint at first, then growing stronger as the tension that had gripped the street slowly dissipated. Vendors cautiously resumed their calls, their voices tentative, almost in awe of the scene that had just unfolded. Phones were still raised, cameras capturing the aftermath, the crowd buzzing with whispers and astonishment. Everyone had witnessed something extraordinary, not just a confrontation, but a demonstration of a principle far older than time: respect, patience, and calm are more powerful than aggression and pride. Steven Seagal, the calm figure at the center of the storm, adjusted his jacket, his expression serene. He didn't shout, he didn't boast, he didn't linger to relish victory. He simply exuded the quiet confidence of someone who knows the value of restraint. The bully, now sitting on the ground, had absorbed the lesson in full force. His earlier arrogance had dissolved into humility, his rage replaced with a dawning understanding that true power does not need to prove itself through aggression. As Steven began to walk away, the crowd instinctively parted for him. He moved slowly, deliberately, giving every observer a final glimpse of the man who had turned a tense confrontation into a lesson in mastery and composure. Children who had watched wide-eyed now whispered to their parents, adults nodded to themselves, and even strangers found themselves reflecting on the subtle yet undeniable message that had unfolded before them. The quiet power of calmness was everywhere. It was in the way Steven had never raised his voice, in the way he had maintained perfect control over his body and presence, in the way he had turned potential chaos into a moment of clarity for everyone watching. Respect, the crowd realized, is not demanded. It is earned silently, through consistency, patience, and an unwavering sense of self. The bully remained on the ground, head bowed. No one mocked him. No one laughed. He had learned his lesson in the purest way possible, through observation, humility, and realization. Sometimes, the most powerful teachers do not raise their fists, they simply show what true control looks like. Steven's gaze swept over the crowd one last time. His eyes softened slightly, acknowledging the fear, awe, and admiration in those watching. And then, without another word, he began to step away from the center of the market, leaving behind a lesson that no one present would ever forget. As he disappeared into the crowd, a gentle murmur spread through the onlookers. They talked of what they had witnessed, the calm strength of a man who could have reacted with fury but instead chose measured presence, the stark contrast between blind aggression and controlled power, the quiet victory that required no celebration, no shouting, no physical domination. In that moment, the market wasn't just a place to buy food or pastime. It had become a stage for a lesson in human behavior, a reminder that the most lasting impact comes not from showing power through force, but from demonstrating strength through patience, composure, and respect. Even as the crowd dispersed, the lesson lingered. Conversations buzzed around the importance of calmness, of measured response, and of understanding that true respect transcends fear. The bully, humbled and thoughtful, had become an unwilling student in the school of quiet mastery. The children would carry the memory for years, a subtle guide in their own encounters with conflict. And the adults, some of whom had long since forgotten what real patience looked like, now had a vivid reminder that composure is always more effective than rage. And so, the day returned to its rhythm. Vendors sold their food, laughter returned to the streets, and the market felt alive again. But no one would forget the lesson that had unfolded in the heart of Tokyo that afternoon, a lesson in restraint, respect, and the quiet but undeniable power of a calm presence. Do you believe calmness can overcome anger and aggression? Comment, respect, if you think true strength is quiet, not loud.